is concerned. And so we are ignorant. We need to be led out of the ignorance of the myth of melanin. We have to do it. We have to do it soon.
When and where and what changed or shaped your perspective?
My father said, never put a stone in another man's path. He also said, you can't judge a book by its cover. He said, don't do it to another person what you wouldn't want done to yourself. He didn't believe in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. He believed in the platinum rule, which was treat others the way they want to be treated. I can't treat you the way I want to be treated because you might not like it. In order for me to treat you the way you want to be treated, I have to ask you how you want to be treated. I have to listen to your answer, and I have to do what you ask. Whole different thing. It makes me so irritated that people pull up the Bible and say, look at what it says here. If you want to quote the Bible and my father, then you realize that the first modern human beings that evolved on this earth were people of color, and according to the Bible, according to the creation story, the first man was made out of dust, which means he made it black or brown. The first woman was made out of his rib. All bone tissue is white. So the first marriage was a multicolored marriage. Now, let's get over it, shall we? Let's get over it. Even the Bible supports the idea that we are all members of the same race. There's only one race. My father believed in one race, the human race. And that's what I believe in. We have very scientific evidence to prove that that's true.
Now, let's
what
go.
got me started was my father refused to tolerate the intolerable. He refused to go along with things that were stupid. And racism is stupid.
Let's go back to, and the reason I want to do this is I have my staff in front of me, all of them. They're young.
Okay.
Miss Elliott, they never heard of the blue eyes, brown eyes exercise.
Oh my God.
That's what I said. My exact words.
Oh my God.
That was my exact words. You're kidding me. And I must say, I said to him, I mean, advisingly, but what are they teaching in school nowadays?
They're teaching the same old thing. They're teaching the same old thing they've always taught. This month we will celebrate Columbus Day. Columbus didn't discover America. You can't discover a place where people are already living. They discovered it before you got there. We should be teaching that Columbus invaded this continent. They're teaching the same old thing. They're teaching the rightness of whiteness. And it is a lie, and we need to get past it.
So explain to the listeners, many of them in that age group, how the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise came about, and what was it, and what was the result?
On the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, we were studying the Indian unit in my third grade classroom in all white, all Christian Riceville, Iowa. And our lesson plan for the next day was to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." Martin Luther King Jr. had been one of our heroes of the month in February, and he was killed at the hands of an assassin in April. I didn't know how to explain what was going on in this country where people of color were concerned to my third grade students. So in order to help them understand what Martin Luther King was in the street complaining about, I decided I would allow some of them to walk in the shoes of a child of color in my classroom for one day. So I separated them according to the color of their eyes, because during the Holocaust, you probably don't know much about the Holocaust either, one of the ways they decided who went into the gas chambers was eye color. I decided that I would separate my students according to the color of their eyes and see what happened. If I hadn't been an ignorant one in April, I didn't know how to explain what was going on in this country where people of color were concerned to my third grade students. So in order to help them understand what Martin Luther King was in the street complaining about, I decided I would allow some of them to walk in the shoes of a child of color in my classroom for one day. So I separated them according to the color of their eyes, because during the Holocaust, you probably don't know much about the Holocaust either, one of the ways they decided who went into the gas chambers was eye color. I decided that I would separate my students according to the color of their eyes and see what happened. If I hadn't been an ignorant white woman didn't know about racism, I probably wouldn't have done that exercise because I didn't know how powerful, how ugly, how painful, how distressing, how destructive racism is. I didn't know that if you separated students, bright students, according to the color of their eyes, you could turn bright children into people who could not compete academically. If I had known that you could turn a little brown, blue-eyed girl, in a brilliant blue-eyed girl who was reading at the 6th grade level in 3rd grade, into a child who couldn't read at the 3rd grade level, just by discriminating against her on the basis of the color of her eyes. If I had known you could do that, I wouldn't have done that exercise. I wouldn't have done that to my students deliberately if I hadn't been so ignorant. I should have known. If I had known that you could take a little brown-eyed dyslexic boy who couldn't read or spell and turn him into a reader and a speller in 20 minutes flat because you gave him magic eyes, if I had known that I could do that, I'd have found another way to do that instead of discriminating against him on the color of his eyes. But I didn't know, and so I did the exercise. And the first day I did the exercise, I found out the first time a student said to me, a brown-eyed student said to me when I told them what we were going to do, one of my brown-eyed students immediately spoke up and said, "Well, you've got them blue eyes. Why are you the teacher here with them blue eyes?" And in that instant, I saw myself as others see me. Robert Burns said, if some great power the gift could give us to see ourselves as others see us, in that instant, I saw myself as people of color see me. Arrogant. That child became an arrogant, superior, conceited, judgmental, hard little person, and I had done that to her. I had created that in 15 minutes flat.
Wow.
If I did not know how I looked to other people until I did that exercise. I learned more that day than my students did because I had more to learn. I had more years to be conditioned to the myth of white superiority than they had.
That cultural conditioning I talk about. Absolutely.
Oh, my God. And when I went down to the teacher's lounge that noon to tell the other 3rd grade teachers what was happening in my classroom because it was so ugly, I needed somebody to share it with. One of the other 3rd grade teachers said, "I don't know how you have time for all that extra stuff. That's all I can do to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic." Well, she hadn't taught reading, writing, and arithmetic yet. She might as well have done the extra stuff. The other one said, 60-some years old and had been molding young minds for over 30 years. In reaction to what I told them about what was going on in my classroom the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, that older teacher said to that group, in that group of about 8 or 10 teachers, "I don't know why you're doing that. I thought it was about time somebody shot that son of a bitch." Now, I don't know. I know you don't like that kind of language on your program. I didn't like that kind of language in the.
Well, let me do this before we go to a break, just to bring you up to date. And Sirius XM is not under FCC sort of regulations. And your language is right in step with the way I tend to talk, and you are straight on, and it's plain conversation, and we are enthralled here. And I need to take a break, but I was just telling you, no, please don't hold back. This is not NPR. Okay, we're straight up. That's the great thing about satellite radio. I mean, we have talk show hosts that will drop the F-bomb 1,000 times a day. So don't sweat that part. Hold on one second. I'm going to tell you something. This is far better than I thought it would be. I really had. No. I mean, as I told, I grew up in this era. I became political as a young adult in this era. And my wife also, and she, when we were looking at all this craziness going on in Washington, somehow Jane Elliott's name popped up, and she said, "Wow, I wonder what she's doing." And I said, "You're absolutely right." She said, "We got to get, if we can find her, we've got to get her on the show, because there's a whole generation out here that knows nothing about this blue-eyed, brown-eye experiment, and it needs to be re-examined." I think the last time I recall, it might have been something on 60 Minutes, maybe years ago, and I may be wrong about that. but it was years and years ago. So let me do this. Let me take a quick break. Can you stay with us a little longer?
Okay.
Okay, we'll take a break. We'll continue and here, don't go anywhere. More with Jane Elliott. Teacher, lecturer, diversity trainer, recipient of the National Mental Health Association Award for Excellence in Education. As you can see, has exposed prejudice and bigotry and it says here an irrational class system based upon purely arbitrary factors. And the thing that I love about what was just written here, if you think this does not apply to you, you are in for a rude awakening. And that's exactly what she is helping us do. It is awakening us, and I hope folk are listening carefully. Let me for people who don't, who maybe aren't familiar with the blue eyes, brown eyes exercise. So what you did, this was your third grade class, the day after Martin Luther King was assassinated. So these children are basically, what, 8 years old, right?
8 and 9 year olds.
8 and 9 year olds. And so
right.
The brown eyes, you made them superior? How did it work? What did you, when you walked in, you told them what? You are superior, you have magic eyes. How did you begin the process?
We talked about what had happened the night before because Martin Luther King Jr. had been one of our heroes of the month.
Okay.
In February.
In February.
And he was dead in April.
Right.
Yeah. And it was, I didn't know how to explain this to them. So when they came in the classroom, the first student who came in the classroom said, "Hey, Miss Elliott, they shot that king last night. Why'd they shoot that king?" I said, "We're going to talk about it, Stephen." So we talked about it. And I could see that they weren't internalizing a thing. They were just regurgitating what they thought I wanted to hear.
Right.
So I said, "Do you have any idea how it feels to be a black person in the United States of America?" "No, they didn't." "Would you like to know?" "Yeah. I said, "Would you like to do something today that would help you to know that?" And it was, yeah, we've already gotten out of spelling and handwriting. Keep this broad talking. We won't have to learn anything all day long. People do that all the time in the class.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you know that.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, today we're going to judge people by the color of their eyes. And since I'm blue-eyed, and most of the students in this room are blue-eyed, brown-eyed children are going to be on the top the first day of this exercise. And that's when the child said to me, "How come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes?"
Wow.
And it started instantly. I realized that my third grade students in all white, all Christian, Riceville, Iowa, had been taught how to be a racist. I was absolutely terrified by what they did and did to one another that day.
Did you give the brown-eyed kids certain advantages? How long did the exercise last?
We did the exercise all day on Friday.
All day?
And then and then we reversed the exercise on Monday. And those brown-eyed kids didn't know it was going to be reversed, so they went home feeling good. And the blue-eyed kids didn't know it was going to be reversed, so they went home feeling real bad. And that was the only mistake I made, was not to clean that up before I sent them home and tell the blue-eyed children it was going to be all right. That's the mistake I made that day. On Monday, we reversed the exercise. The same kinds of ugly things happened on Monday as it happened on Friday, but with one real big difference. The blue-eyed children were much less vicious to the browns than the browns had been to them. And when the third day, on Tuesday, after we had written little 4-paragraph essays about what they'd learned, when we got in the magic circle and we talked about what had happened, I asked the blue-eyed children, "Why didn't you treat the brown-eyed children as badly as they treated you?" And those kids almost in concert said, "Because I didn't want to make anybody feel the way they made me feel. I didn't want to do that to somebody else." They had learned what the impact of your behaviors is on other human beings. We aren't teaching that in schools today. We could make it. Kenneth Clark wrote the introduction to the book about this exercise, and I don't get anything out of these books I'm telling you to read. You need to understand that I really am ignorant. I sign off on everything. But Kenneth Clark, in the book, in the introduction to the book, A Class Divided Then and Now, said, "Jane Elliott's contribution demonstrates that it is possible to educate and produce a class of human beings united by understanding, acceptance, and empathy." We could do this.
Mm-hmm.
You can't measure this on a standardized test.
Yeah.
You can measure it on how well people relate to one another and how well they treat one another.
And as I tell people, there's a distinction between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is how you experience. what a person went through. That's why those blue-eyed kids reacted the way. That's the empathy.
That's right.
You know, see, you'll hear people, for example, they say, well, I sympathize. Well, that's it. To sympathize is a more shallow.
Yeah, well, you can put your sympathy where the sun doesn't shine, let me tell you. Nobody wants sympathy. If you can empathize with somebody, if you can put yourself in their position.
That's right.
And try to experience what it is that they experience in order to make them feel and act the way they do, that's empathy. But just to feel sorry with someone doesn't do anyone any good. Instead of feeling sympathy, try to put yourself in their position, and then you'll know what it is they're going through. We don't do that in this country. We don't have to. If you're white, you don't have to. However, you know and I know that people of color know all about white folks. You have to know. I remember, I do this exercise with adults, and they act exactly the way the children do. In Kansas City, there was a black woman who refused to go along because the brown-eyed people are always on the top in the exercise when I do it with adults. Always. Because brown-eyed people, most of the people of color in this country have brown eyes, so they're always the people on the top. They've been on the bottom. They don't need that experience. White people, blue-eyed white people do. This black woman refused to go along, and we finally seduced her into going along. We finally said, "You just not say anything.
Okay.
Don't support them. Don't attack them, but don't support them." Okay, she'd go along. I asked her friend why she wouldn't go along later, and she said, "Jane, you don't understand. She wouldn't go along because we know how ignorant you white people are." She said, "In order for us to survive, you have to succeed." So she said, we have been taught to take care of you white people all our lives because we know how ignorant you are. I was absolutely gobsmacked.
Wow.
It had never occurred to me that the people we have been describing, we white folks, have been describing as ignorant, are the ones who see us as we really are. We are really ignorant.
So can I just need your analysis. I was on Al Sharpton's show yesterday. And can we play the exchange, what Limbaugh said, and then what my response is? And
do I want to listen to Limbaugh?
Oh, well, you want to hear you'll want to hear my response. How's that?
Okay, yeah.
All right, play both, and let's just do a quick analysis. Go ahead.
School kids, I found out, still going to get breakfast, lunch, snack, ecstasy, whatever else they get. All of the welfare checks and all of the food stamp cards are still usable. They have not been shut down. Everybody in Obama's base, depending on government, is going to have a fine day.
They just can't stand the fact that they've got a very smart, intelligent black man that has out-thought them, out-campaigned them, beat them twice without any controversy. The nerve, the absolute nerve to use crack cocaine, something that destroyed individuals, destroyed families, practically destroyed communities, to compare it to something that heals people, that brings families together, that allows them to save money, allows them to be well, is absolutely absurd. And fat-ass Rush Limbaugh really has some nerve. Here was a man that even talked his maid into stealing drugs from her husband so that he could have a high. So, I mean, let's call it what it is. These people simply have lost their freaking minds. Could I be a good student of your class?
Well, I think when you say they've lost their minds, that's a small loss. We'd never miss it. He did that so many years ago. I hate even to dignify him by saying his name on the same show on which I'm doing an interview.
Yeah.
It is a total waste of time to talk about that ignorant, I get world creator. He is absolutely, he has no relevance to what's happening in this country today, none whatsoever, because he doesn't have to think. To do what he's doing, he doesn't have to think. All he has to do is spout the same thing that he has heard himself say over and over and over. He is his most enthusiastic listener. He and Ann Coulter should be put in a boat and set out to sea. Sorry about that.
Well, no need to apologize on this show. I mean, I just got to have you back. We got to get her a Sirius XM radio so she can have some alternative listening. Please quit apologizing.
I'm glad I'm not opinionated.
Please quit apologizing. Let me ask.
I'm not apologizing for what I said.
No, I know. Yeah, I know. No,
something about this situation.
Well, that's going to be my next line of conversation and that is, what do we do about it? Where do we go? How do we counter this? You're doing what you're doing. I take it you're still lecturing and speaking around the country.
I had to stop for 2 years because my husband was in the process of dying, and now he is gone last week, and now I'm going to go back to work.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And so you're going now back to lecturing and that type of thing. By the way, is there a do you have a website where people can attend your lectures and that type of thing?
I have a website, and you can go to my website, but you won't find out where I'm lecturing because I don't put that on the net. I've been threatened with death so many times that if these crazies knew where I was going to be, I would be in even more danger.
Yeah.
So if you want to know where I'm going to be, you call me and I'll tell you.
All right. Okay. It's the Jane Elliott's of the world that I wish you 30 and 40 somethings would learn and educate and listen to and be educated. As she said, education is leading people out of ignorance. And it's this, a lot of folks ask, why are you who you are now? It's because of the Jane Elliott's of the world, I'm telling you. And we've never met.
No. Wait a minute. It isn't just because of the Jane Elliott. I have a very, very, very small piece of this situation. You need to realize that most of what I've learned from black people. White people don't know it. In order for me to find out what's happening in this country, in fact, I have to go to people of color. Because they know what's happening, and they know why it's happening, they know how it's happening, and they know how to cope with it. Most white people have no understanding whatsoever of what it is that is making people of color upset with what's going on. Barack Obama was elected.
Yeah, but you end up having to educate both black and white people.
Yeah, because many black people believe the myth of melanin.
That's my point.
Yes.
When I talk about cultural conditioning, many black people are culturally conditioned to believe in their own inferiority.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm coming from, right?
If you've heard it from birth, and now you can see it on television,
right?
And that's what television has been. It's been a great facilitator of racism and ignorance.
Yeah.
And it continues to be. If you've got that in front of you 24/7, how do you expect a child of 8 not to believe that nonsense?
Yeah.
If there is no alternative offered.
That's right.
Nobody, if you have had the power to turn the blessed family white, when we know that Mary was born in the Middle East and had dark hair and dark skin and brown eyes, without a doubt. But we white Christians have managed to change her into a white person with blonde hair and blue eyes. Look at a Christmas card, not in the black community, but in practically every other area you see.
Yep.
When you see the Blessed Virgin, she looks like Christina Aguilera.
Final question, Miss Elliott, and that is what was if any, the fallout in your school after this exercise, this blue-eyed, brown-eyes exercise?
Nobody spoke to me for 12 years. They beat my children. My children were beaten. They were spit on. Their belongings were destroyed. They were physically and socially and psychologically abused by their peers, by their teachers, by the parents of their peers, because they had a nigger lover for a mother. And that is what I am called by the lunatic fringe in that community to this day. And make no mistake about that. That is my title. And that was my children's title. There were streets in that little town where my children couldn't walk because they had a nigger lover for a mother. My parents lost their business. My husband lost all his friends. I became totally isolated. When my father died, my mother kicked me out of the family because, and we were in a large Irish Catholic family. Irish Catholic with her, just Irish with my dad. But she kicked me out of the family because I had embarrassed the family with that eye color thing.
Wow.
That was the fallout from that exercise.
Mm.
And does that make me regret doing it? For my kids' sake, yes. But for the difference that exercise has made in the children that went through it and in the adults that went through it. And when I do it with adults, I get the same reactions that I get with children. The difference that it makes in the people who go through that exercise, all that is worth what people learn.
We'll close there. I hope we can have you back. I really do, because I think, and not just to tell the story. This is an introduction for people who have never heard of Jane Elliott or the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. But I think what we need, as I'm listening here with the third ear, is that we need a straightforward analysis of what's going on, because it's playing out in front of us on Capitol Hill. It's playing out in this shutdown. It's playing out with this president. And as someone emailed me and said, that they're tired of this, what do they call it, soft spokenness that we hear from commentators too much on TV. That's why I played what I said after when I was on Al Sharpton's show. I'm just tired of all this soft talk.
Well, you mustn't speak in an ugly way. But how do you describe an ugly situation without using ugly language?
Yeah.
It's not possible.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You cannot be kind where racism is concerned, where ignorance is concerned. You can't go at it with a sponge. You have to go at it with a machete.
I'm an old football player. You can't play touch when everybody's playing tackle.
That's right. That's exact. And they're playing tackle.
Yes,
these angry redneck. I'm sorry, redneck is the only way to describe some of these folks. They're playing hardball. They're playing softball. They're playing hardball, and they intend to destroy Obama's presidency. They haven't been able to yet, but people have to get up in 2014. People have to come out in huge numbers and see to it that we change the makeup of the Congress. And somebody has said, if pro is the opposite of con, what is the opposite of progress?
Regress.
Congress.
Yeah, or regress, Congress, regress, yeah. But I've said that these folks are not conservatives, they're regressives. But same thing, same thought, yeah.
No sense to it. There's no sense to it. They have stopped speaking. When they see the color of that man's skin, they stop thinking.
Yeah.
They can only react to what they have been taught, and that is the ignorance of judging people on the basis of physical characteristics over which they have absolutely no control.
We'll end where we begin. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us. All right.
Well, thank you for calling. Okay.
We'll have you back. I promise, here on the Madison Show. Thank you. All right. Let's take a break. We'll continue and take calls here. And based on what you've heard up to the top of the hour, 1-866-801